The western leg of Pro Farmer Crop Tour got off to a disappointing start as the weather challenges in South Dakota and Nebraska seem to be the biggest story out of Crop Tour this week. I traveled with scouts across the western leg of the tour to see the disappointments as well as where they found the garden spot this year.
And this corn crop, I think, has felt a lot of stress from day one.
Chip Flory has been on the Pro Farmer Crop Tour for 30 years.
When you come up here and you get into an area where the planting date wasn't anything spectacular, it was a little bit late, and we've got corn that is denting, it means that it's been pushed.
And this year, southeast South Dakota shows a corn crop that struggled from the start.
And then the heat that we had during pollination is showing up in some of the ears that we've sampled because of some shotgun pollination, not getting pollinated on the butt of the ear or on the tip of the ear.
He says this crop was also stressed post-pollination, with scouts seeing small kernels that will take a bite out of South Dakota's final yielding areas.
So 100 bushel corn yield calculated might end up being 85 or an 80 because of a reduced kernel size. So it's a crop that has experienced several stress periods in the 22 growing season.
As Brent Judish trekked across Nebraska this week, dryland fields north of Grand Island showed scars of both drought and heat.
We had some ears yesterday were tipped back from the top 3 inches, from the bottom 2 inches. That's something I've never seen before.
And as Judish got into fields just east of Grand Island Tuesday morning,
this one here had a lot more stress than this one did, but we've seen that for a day and a half now.
scouts saw irrigated yields up from Monday's routes across Nebraska, but still well below average.
First one was in the 140 range, and we had a 158, I think. So that's 30, 40 bushel less than we expected, but even way less than normal for this area.
Randy Holes is a scout this week, but he also farms about 20 miles south of Lincoln. He says the majority of his area is dry land, and those acres are so dry that corn harvest will be one of the earliest on record.
We're looking at next week possibly on the short season, early planted. So, and
typically harvest in August?
No.
And Judish says for him, soybeans were the bigger disappointment across Nebraska this year.
This year they're showing stress. They're white in the afternoon. They got the leaves upside down. There's areas in the field where there's some browning going on where they're giving up. I haven't seen this much stress on my 10 tours.
As scouts waded through western Iowa on Wednesday, conditions did improve.
It seems like everybody wants to talk about record yield or disaster, and we're neither one of those right now.
While scouts found a better crop than what they saw the first 2 days, Peter Meyer says he's still not impressed with the corn. One major reason? Low ear count.
This is where we're losing the yield, right? Where we've had obviously some problems here. The weather did not cooperate early on, pollination issues, and then in the case of Nebraska, that crop really went backwards in the last 2 weeks.
Michael McGuire farms in the southwest corner of Iowa, and he says corn yields will be well below last year's surprising yields.
I'd say we're going to be below APH by like 20 bushel. And in this area, the last 5 years, anything below 200 is about crop failure. We've been raising some pretty good corn here lately.
When scouts entered Carroll County, Iowa on Wednesday, they seemed to find the garden spot of western Iowa this year.
But there's really only a couple county area in all of west central Iowa that has great yield potential this year.
The more promising story across western Iowa could be the soybeans.
I would say that there's a greater chance today of these producers yielding APH or above in beans than there is corn for sure.
Stronger soybeans with some spotty showers sweeping across Iowa on Wednesday. Rains that are too late to impact most of the corn.
Look, it's not a disaster like Nebraska was, for sure, but I think that a lot of this part of western Iowa has been baked into the market already.
It is.
But I don't think the Nebraska numbers have been baked into the market yet.
As scouts suited up and hit the fields Thursday morning, it was a cooler and wetter start in Minnesota.
The one thing that impressed me most is the ear count.
Tim Gregerson found stronger ear counts and better yields.
Here in southern Minnesota, the ear count is right there. It is better than in Iowa on the samples we have taken today.
Ear counts were solid, but so was another major factor for yield.
This has got more kernel depth than 3/4 of the samples I've taken on the tour this year.
But for Minnesota farmer Brad Nelson, a wetter spring and later planting dates has not seemed to hurt his yields.
We had a really good week of weather after we planted. It was up in 8 days. It all came up.
It's southern Minnesota's soybeans that seemed to be a bit of a disappointment on Thursday.
All summer long, I just didn't feel like beans had the oomph to really get over the top.
Field after field, that's something scouts noticed as they calculated the soybean samples.
Pod counts are, some of them aren't even 1,000. The beans themselves are short and the pod count is a little bit light this year.
Well, was it just what scouts found on Crop Tour that seemed to support commodity prices earlier this week? We'll look into the market drivers with Chip Flory and Brian Grady next.